Let's talk about the database exam. Again, fairly straightforward in terms of presentation. I know the audience for this particular exam should have knowledge and skills about databases and relational databases, such as Microsoft SQL Server. You know, honestly, there aren't a lot of questions that I would say are particularly exclusive to Microsoft SQL Server. A lot of them are just SQL questions. So, yeah, that is basically the gist. So, looking at the exam, there are 5 domains, of which there's kind of an interesting weighting scenario. So 20 to 25% from core database concepts that are, you know, like what is a table kind of things. And then what is a relational database? What is the data manipulation language? What is data definition language? How can we create database objects? And then 20 to 25% about syntax specifically relating to like data types, creating tables, and using things like views, and then select, insert, update, and delete. 25 to 30% on manipulating the data. So using select queries to extract data from the table, using joins, inserting data, updating that data, deleting the data. But again, multiple choice questions only. So they're just having you read syntax and give the right answer. And then 15 to 20% about data storage. These are mostly questions about normalization and database design. So why do we have keys? What primary keys? Composite keys, right? Stuff like that. But there's a lot of questions about normalization. They do the 5 most common levels of normalization, whereas I know that most students have only ever seen 3. That is probably one of the trickier parts. There's 5 levels of normalization. And then 10 to 15% about database administration. So questions about security, backups, restoring, stuff like that. Kind of interesting. All right, so let's jump in. Sample questions, starting with our first domain. Again, just like the other exam, if you have questions, if you need me to clarify something, please speak up in the chat. I would so much rather handle anything here. They are a lot of scenario-based questions, kind of like with the C# exam, where you have a scenario and then they give you a couple of follow-up questions to dig into. So this particular scenario, we have a high school student named Rajesh. He works part-time in his dad's cycle shop in India. This was the first city in India to have dedicated lanes for cycles. And Raj's dad currently keeps track of his inventory using pencil and paper. Ordering parts and accessories for counting inventory takes several days. Makes you wonder why they included that whole first part about bicycles or whatever. It's like one of those distractors. Raj is taking a database management class in school, and he realizes that his dad's business could benefit greatly by implementing a database management system. He needs to review a few basic concepts before he starts, and has made a list of topics he knows will be important in the first steps of the project. So our question is, identify the tables that Raj might create for the database. So we're talking about bicycles. So a table for each part, each cycle, and each type of accessory would be seriously weird overkill. One table for all parts, cycles, and accessories is madness. So hopefully we understand that the answer is A. We would have a parts table, a cycle table, and accessories table. So identify the fields that Raj should use for column headings of the parts table. And so, you know, we didn't get a ton of information from the scenario. This has to feel very much like common sense. on what would we store in a table about bicycle parts. So part number, part name, cycle number, cycle name. Yes, but C is the better answer. Part number, part name, quantity, color, and cycle identifier is the better answer. So A is good, but C is best. And then what is the name of the data located at the intersection of a row and a column? This is just terminology, hopefully like all the way from chapter 1. We know that they're talking about a field, right? Just a particular cell, so to speak. The intersection of a row and column is a field. So some of this first part is just terminology: fields, columns, rows, tables, records. Let's look at this scenario question, which is about relational database concepts. So he's trying to determine the most useful relationships between the tables for the cycle business. He knows that he will need to conduct searches by using data in one table to find additional data in another table. And so we need to figure out the relationships between the tables. So a relationship between the supplier table and the parts table. So we have a supplier which provides parts to the cycle shop. So based on the information in the scenario, this would be a one-to-many relationship. Every supplier provides one-to-many parts. What is a good foreign key for the relationship between the cycle table and the parts table? So remember, a foreign key is that relationship that we build between two tables where we're referencing information in another table's primary key. So I would say in this particular one, it's the part number, right? We always want to go for the unique identifiers. So the part number, not the part name. And then what is the suggested primary key for the accessory table? Well, primary keys always need to be unique. And so we would use the accessory number. Many accessories might have the same name or model, but we could probably assume that the number would be a unique value. And so that's a requirement for a primary key. So if you need to go back over relational models of one-to-one relationships, many-to-many, parent-child, primary versus foreign key, all that information is going to be in this particular domain. Let's look at a data manipulation language question. So the next step is to work with his dad to learn what operations he needs to perform with the database. These are called user requirements. His dad needs the new application to perform these tasks, and we've got them lined out here about what they need to do. Inventory reports, sales reports, add new inventory when it arrives, change the cost of cycles and parts, remove cycles from the database when they are sold. So here's an example of the kinds of questions you'll get where we need to be able to identify syntax. So you're not writing any SQL, but you will get a lot of these questions where we have to look at syntax. So what command must be used to indicate that a cycle was sold and should be removed from the cycle table? Well, in SQL, hopefully we know that we use delete, not remove, not erase. So we would say A. And then what command is used to report on the current on-hand quantities of red cycles? So we have our cycle table. So we don't have cycle model, we have cycle. Where cycle color equals red, we would select that, we wouldn't find it. So it's B. And then how is a new cycle added to the cycle table in the database? Well, we know that we insert data, not add. So it's either A or C. So we would check the syntax, and it's C. Insert into cycle values, and then the values that we want to add into the database. So hopefully you understand kind of these kinds of questions where, you know, they're going to give you this scenario. We're going to build upon this idea. We need to understand how to write the SQL, but we're just given a multiple choice question of syntax that we need to check. But they are going to check, or they're going to test you on inserts, updates, deletes, creating, modifying, dropping relational databases, entities, like dropping tables, and all of that's fair game, right? Anything that you could probably write a query for is going to be fair game in this section. So here's one on using the DDL, which is that data definition language. So we are wanting to use a website to advertise and sell cycles. And so Raj immediately realizes that his current database schema needs to be changed if we're going to allow users to buy from the internet. He's going to have photos of the products, including cycles, accessories, and parts. So which DDL command would Raj use to add a new field to the cycle table to store the file name of the photo? So the cycle table already exists. We're adding a new column. So we use alter when we want to change an existing table, and we use alter table. So A is the correct answer. Alter table, name of the table, add, name of the column, and then the data type and any other parameters we might need to add on there. In the example of the previous question, what effect does the word null have when adding a new cycle to the table? So they're talking about this right here, this null out to the side of the data type. So the correct answer here is B. It does not require the user to enter a file name for the photo. Basically means that null values or non-existing values are allowed. Hi, Sun. Thank you for the follow. What is the main difference between the DML command delete and the DDL command drop? This is a great question. I get this question from students sometimes as we are working on these kinds of queries. And so they are not the same task, and there is a difference. So it's not A. Delete removes all or a subset of records from a table only. It does not remove the table. Drop removes all the records from the table only. It does not remove the table. Well, C is false. That's not a correct statement. So it's B. Delete does remove all or a subset of records from the table. It does not remove the table. Drop does remove the table, which is why C is false. That's not a correct statement. Yes, Tokyo is a great help for these kinds of things. I appreciate it. We're going to get a whole bunch of students to pass their certification exam. It's going to be awesome. I will say that our pass rate on the SQL exam is higher. I think we're close to like 85% of students passing the SQL exam. So the C# exam is, I think, the harder of the two, definitely. All right, so our second domain is about creating database objects. So if we go back and look at what that entails, that's about data types, how they affect storage requirements, the purpose of tables, ANSI SQL syntax for creating tables, and then again, things on select, insert, update, and delete, but specifically about stored procedures, functions, and views. Good stuff, right? SQL to the SQL. Way more worried about SQL. Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for being a little nervous when going into a certification exam, just because When I get nervous, I think it sharpens me a little bit. I start looking for all those tricks. But I know some people get nervous and just completely blow up. So if you're a blow up kind of person, breathe. It's going to be okay. 45 minutes is generally plenty of time too. I usually have students trying to leave early, so yeah. But I would advocate that you take your time and read questions. You know, do that thing where you go back over questions and stuff like that. Just good test taking strategies. So let's look at our first scenario for domain 2. We have Yan. He's taking a programming course in school. He's asked for advice on selecting a project for class. They're going to create a program to help organize a CD collection. Who has a CD collection? Do people still buy CDs? That's weird. Anyway, Yan likes the idea. He can create a database table to store all of the data related to his mother's collection and use C# or Visual Basic to create a user interface to search, add, or delete information from the table. And so he knows that defining the table fields is very important, and selecting the right data type for each field is critical. God help the CD collection. So what data type should Yan use to store the CD label name? So really we're looking at, you know, is this text data? Is it numerical data? Everyone buys vinyl. I gotta organize my vinyl collection, right? What was it I was watching the other day and someone was like, I only buy CDs because that's the way music like this was meant to be heard. I think that's a Parks and Rec episode. Anyway, I'm gonna get all distracted. All right, so data types. The CD label name, we're really looking at whether or not this is like character data, you know, text data, numerical data. It's definitely not numerical data. Name, no, that's not a thing. So we know it's A, right? It's char or variable char data. What data type should he use to store the number of tracks on each CD? Well, that is a numerical value. We also know that it's probably a whole number. You can't really have half a track on a CD. So I would say an integer value. So we really can't have like a decimal portion of a song. But we always want to think about, would we want to do some kind of mathematical calculation with this data being numerical? I would say maybe you would. Maybe you want to know total tracks on the albums or something like that. So that seems reasonable to choose an integer. And then what data type should he use to store the duration of the song in total seconds? So the duration in minutes or seconds, given the choices, byte, integer, or Boolean, would have to be integer. Now, I don't agree that it would necessarily be integer as a numerical data type, but I think that they specifically limit the choices that you're given in this case so that you don't overthink this one too much. It could be a short album, right? Right. So in this particular case, integer would be fine. So if you're not terribly familiar with the data types, the possible ranges of values for particular data types, operations that can be performed on data types, or how they're stored in memory, you will get questions that ask you about like which one should you use if we're trying to use the least amount of memory, those kinds of questions that make you think about performance. So you should really know the difference. And then just, yeah, various data types, you know, integers, floating points, characters, Booleans, what they store, what's legal values. Okay, so let's look at a table creation question. So Yan has identified the data fields he needs in his database table and the best data type for each piece of data. So he's ready to create the tables, and he plans to set the table up using proper ANSI SQL syntax. I can't say it today. ANSI SQL syntax. And wants to brush up on the details before he begins. And this is what I was talking about with this exam. There's not a lot that is specifically Microsoft SQL. ANSI SQL is a standard. And so all of the syntax meets this particular standard, which is nice, I guess. So if you maybe spend more time in a different SQL environment. You shouldn't have to pick up too much to make this work for you. So, proper ANSI SQL, nope, can't say it today, not working for me, refers to a set of rules that decides if a field can contain a blank value or not. No. Determine the size of all the data fields. No. It governs the structure and content of statements. It's basically syntax rules, right? That's what it's talking about. It's syntax rules. Which SQL command is used to add a new table? Well, we create tables. We don't add them. We don't insert tables. We insert data into tables, but the table has to exist. So to create a table, we use a create table statement. The syntax here is table name, and in parentheses, column name, data type, null, not null, comma separated, right? So based on the information Yan has gathered, what data field can he use for a unique key to access the data in the table? So artist name wouldn't be unique. CD label name could be unique, but probably not track name, right? Track names or song names. I can think of plenty of song names that are the same between multiple albums. So I would definitely go for B on that one. So again, SQL syntax, grammar rules, governing structure and content of statements, how to create tables. Again, we talked about primary and foreign keys earlier, but they harp on that a little bit in various sections. So understanding, unique values and how to choose a primary or foreign key. All right, so Yan is learning about views in his database management class. We recently learned about views in our database management class. Hopefully that information is very fresh. His instructor explained that there are two approaches to creating views. We can use the command line language transact SQL or by using a graphical designer. I don't teach my students how to use the graphical designer. It's cheating. You will write the transact SQL. Yan wants to apply his new learning to the database project he's creating for his mother's CD collection. He's identified the following requirements for his application and will use T-SQL to create views. So again, we have our list of things that this particular view is going to need to do, or multiple views. So what is the best application of views and T-SQL for this project? The graphical designer the first week. Yeah, there's really no, it's the learning. You need the learning. All right, so would we create separate views with the information for each request, create a new table for each of the requirements in the list, or add data to the existing tables when more CDs are purchased? Well, we have this list of things, right? We want to view all CDs sorted in alphabetical order. We want to report on all CDs with a certain number of tracks. We want to create a list of CDs by artist, and we want to calculate a count of all CDs. So the answer is A. We would create separate views with the information for each of those bullet points. Yeah. Which of the following is an important benefit of using views? They allow the user to access the data in the tables directly. No, that's the opposite of using views. Reduce the storage requirements for the application and database. Has nothing to do with that. They are used to represent summation data. So in this case, for the bullet points listed, views are a great choice. And then which code segment creates a view containing the title, artist, and year for all CDs with more than 10 tracks? So again, looking at some syntax, determining which one is correct. We are creating a view, so we use create view. We know it's not going to be B. And so looking at the syntax, we use create view, give it a name, as, and then we create a SQL query that will encapsulate that view of what we ultimately want to store. And so A is the correct syntax here, where we have a proper select statement set up for CD title, our artist, There's a weird hyphen in there. I don't know where that came from. Year from our CD collection where tracks greater than 10. Whatever's going on here in C is not proper syntax for this select statement. So if the stuff about views is not fresh, you want to go back and look at that. You know, how to make queries, create views, how to access views. Should know that there's a graphical designer, but most of the time they're going to ask you about code. I don't think there's actually any questions on how to do stuff in the graphical designer. They just reference it like it exists. So don't worry about knowing how to do stuff. Yeah, here, this next scenario is about the closest that you'll get to stuff about graphical designers. So he discovered that some common functionality is available in predefined SQL functions. By utilizing these built-in, ready-to-use functions, he can increase his productivity and spend his time creating other necessary user-defined functions. He's also learned to distinguish between aggregate and scalar functions, which if you don't remember those keywords, you'll want to look those up. But which aggregate function can Yan use to calculate the total number of CDs in the CD collection database? So if you'll remember from aggregate functions, you know, all of these are aggregate functions, but it's what we ultimately want the result to be. So the total number of CDs is a count, right? We wouldn't sum that. We would count it. But all of these are aggregate functions. They all return some kind of aggregation of the data. Yan is not quite sure how scalar functions work. Which of the following is a scalar function? Ooh, do we remember what that means? Scalar functions return a single value based on the input of a single field. One value. If you're not familiar with these different functions, this becomes a very tricky thing to do. Because you're like, is first a function? Is uCase a function? I've never heard of that function. What does it do? C is the correct answer here. You can probably surmise this means uppercase, right? Returns the value of all fields in uppercase letters. But if you're not familiar with these function names, it can be kind of difficult to choose the right answer if you're guessing a little bit, educationally guessing. Stored procedures. How is a stored procedure invoked? Do we run it? Do we execute it? Do we perform it? We execute them. Like kill them. No, like off with their heads. So we execute procedure name, input values. So for this, would it be safe to assume they wouldn't suggest fake functions? No, I wouldn't trust them not to stick some fake function in there. No, that totally seems like something they would do. And no, that seems rude. But I would expect them to throw like the red herrings in there and just because they do stuff like this, like perform. Like that's not a thing. So yeah, I would expect there to be fake functions too. So that's the end of this domain. So questions about functions, differences between different types of functions, aggregate functions, scalar functions, user-defined functions, stored procedures. What are they? What are the differences? How could they be written? How can they be called? All of that good stuff. All right, domain 3 is about manipulating the data. So these are, and again, this is the chunky 25 to 30% of your questions are just basically going to be syntax questions. So yeah, utilizing select, insert, update, delete. So our first scenario, Katrina is an intern in the Information Systems Division of AdventureWorks. She's studying database management. She goes on athletic adventures in Nova Scotia. Part of her new position includes writing SQL queries to analyze data about current trends in the recreational activities on the island enjoyed by residents and tourists. She's going to create reports about hiking, whale watching, kayaking, camping, and golfing. So, which command would ensure that return visitors are only counted once when running a query against the reservation system? Well, this is that keyword that I harp on you guys all the time. You don't use this unless you know that you need to remove duplicates, and that is distinct. Some of you have a distinct habit of putting this in places it doesn't belong. But we know that we want unique visitors. Return visitors are only counted once. We use the distinct keyword. For some of the reports, it will be useful to see the results in alphabetical order, which command will produce an alphabetical list. So we get our ascendings and descendings backwards, but in this case, they're writing it either ascending or descending. They want you to choose the correct clause here. So order by, sort by, or arrange by. There's no such thing as sort by or arrange by. Those are made up. So the right answer here is order by. Hopefully we've done enough order bys that we remember that one. A truth table is helpful in visualizing the results of logical operations. When comparing two fields, which condition will always result in true? So this is just like a programming logic kind of question. So if we have the AND operator and only one field, then it equals true. The OR operator and at least one field equals true. The AND operator and at least one field equals false. The correct answer here is B, because we know with an AND operation we have to have both fields in order to have a true result. And we wouldn't pick C because we wanted to always result in true. So an OR operator, at least one field, true. That's just like a programming logic question. But I guess they just want to check. So select statement questions using things like distinct, syntax questions using where or order by, Boolean logical operators, and or truth tables. That's all in this section. So let's look at what they call a complex query question. So Katrina is 3 weeks into her internship, realizes that by applying some complex queries to the recreational trends database, she will be able to produce some very enlightening reports. She decides to take some time to review the concepts for subqueries, predicate, scalar, and tables, unions, joins, and intersects. So some fun keywords there if we don't remember. So which statement best defines a predicate subquery? Well, let's start with subqueries nest inside other queries, right? So returns a single value, can be used in case expressions, where clauses, order bys, and select. Returns a table based on the queries nested in the from clause, uses extended logical constructs in the where clause, using and or like between as and top. It is C. So if we don't remember when we read about subqueries, I like this question. It's good stuff. All right, what's the difference between union and join? I know this is a common question because we kind of think of the two of them as the same. And so when you read these, combines the results of two SQL queries, where there's the same number of columns and data types, or B, where there's at least one column match, or C, returns only rows that appear in both tables. The answer is A. So a union combines the results of two SQL queries where there's the same number of columns and data types. Adjoin returns rows when there's at least one column match. So that is the difference. And then when should the intersect query be used? If we don't remember what an intersect is, it combines two or more select statements with an and. So we use these in the case of C to return only the rows that appear in both tables. And in the case of our truth table, like it points out, similar to a Boolean and, as opposed to a Boolean or, where the rows have to appear in both tables, and then that's what we get as the result. So I know that those are not, they're things that we cover in the chapters, but they're not necessarily covered in the homework. So if you need to go back and look at unions, which are select statements with an or function, intersects, which are select statements with an and function, joins, subqueries, different types of subqueries, you will find all of those questions in this section. All right, next scenario. So AdventureWorks has gathered lots of new data from tourists about their preferences for recreational activities in Nova Scotia. Her first task is to insert new rows into the database to store this data. She wants to refresh her memory on how to efficiently and correctly insert data into a database before she attempts this very important task. So, when designing an insert SQL statement, what happens if data is missing for a particular column? And so, I know you're tempted to think, well, are nulls allowed, or can I just insert something there? But looking at the answers that we are given, the best answer here is B. The insert statement will use the default value for the column. So if the column doesn't have a default value and nulls are not allowed, then you would get an error, but that does not make A the best answer. How can she set up the insert to allow the programmer to copy rows from other tables? So we use the insert into. If you've never tried this, I know some of you made copies of your tables and things when we start manipulating data, but you use the insert into with a select in order to copy rows from other tables. If you've not tried that before, that is what that does. What is the correct syntax for inserting multiple rows at one time? So if we have a bunch of rows and we want to insert them all, the correct syntax is C. Insert into table, column, 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 values, 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 and then another parenthesis, value, value, value. And you can just keep making comma separated blocks of parenthesis separated column data. Saves time when you have multiple rows that you're inserting into a table at once. So lots of questions, I'm sure, about insert, insert into with select, syntax, just making sure that you understand how to put data in your table. Likewise with update. So the database manager for the team is pleased with her progress and has given her a new assignment. She'll be responsible for writing the SQL stored procedures that will be used by the developers to insert, update, and delete data from the database. So if she wants to update all records in a database to reflect an increase in the provincial value-added tax from 8% to 10%, what is the correct syntax? So we know that she's going to update, so it's not B. And we are updating all records. We're setting the tax to 10%. And so the correct syntax here is A. Updating the table, setting the value equal to what we want it to set to. And since we're updating all values, we don't need a where clause. Making sure that we're very careful about that kind of thing, right? Anytime we update or delete, I harp on you guys about having where clauses. All right, so she wants to update data if a condition is true and perform an alternative update if the condition is false. Which of the following is the best choice? So the best choice is a case statement, not an if then else. A case statement creates a when this else functionality. So when a condition is met, do this, else do something else, and that is the best syntax to create this kind of update. One of the developers mentioned that sometimes he needs to update data in one table from another table. Which of the following is the correct syntax for this kind of update? So we're updating data in a table and another table at the same time. So the correct syntax here is C. Update the table, set the value equal to whatever we want to set it to, plus our other update column, other table. This is probably new syntax. You may not have seen this before. I'm not sure that this is in the book. So, in this section, again, adding to our SQL syntax, updates, where clause used in an update statement, case statements, making sure that we understand kind of that logical update flow. I want to update based on a condition, otherwise update something else. And then deleting data. She wants to use SQL to delete existing data in the database. The procedures must allow for the deletion of data from single or multiple tables, and these transactions must ensure data and referential integrity. In case we don't remember what those mean, right? I want to go back and look up referential integrity. So what happens if a where statement is not included with the delete statement? What did I just say? That's what I just said, right? I think I had a video somewhere that was like, if you do a delete and you drop everything in your table and then you email me and ask me to restore it, I'm gonna laugh. And I had a student email me and she's like, please don't laugh, but will you restore my table? I responded, I told her I laughed a little bit. Couldn't stop me from it. You dropped all your table. Don't do it again. This is my serious face. So, hopefully we know that the data from the table is deleted. All of it. All of it. It's bad. Don't do that. So scared. Everyone should be scared. You should be scared of doing deletes. It is scary. It's not like it's going to prompt you or ask you if that's okay. It just trusts that you know, and sometimes you don't know and you delete the whole table. But it's okay to understand these things when we're learning, and it's not okay to delete whole tables and then go home for the weekend. Like I totally didn't do one time. So how are transactions useful when updating, deleting, adding records to a database? Now we talk about transactions in my class, and I encourage you to use them and practice using them, but some people don't listen to me. So how are transactions useful? They allow multiple statements to be grouped together to avoid data integrity errors. Yes. They count the number of changes to records in the table. I mean, they do that. They restrict updates to only allow one statement to execute at a time. No. So the answer here is A. How can a programmer enforce data integrity rules when making changes to the records in a database? So when all statements in a transaction have successfully completed, issue a commit statement. Yes. So we want to check that all statements in a transaction have successfully completed, and then we can commit those. You wouldn't roll them back. Continue to the next statement. So C makes no sense. You wouldn't roll them back, so it's A. So in this section, deleting transactions, use of the rollback keyword, use of the commit command. So if all statements are correct within a single transaction, committing command records the changes to the database. Rollback obviously rolls them back, but if you need to brush up on your transactions, then that's an important area too. All right, that's the end of section 3. We're almost there, guys. 4 of 5. The understanding data storage section, 15 to 20% of the exam, is about normalization. And I know normalization is like a topic that everyone hates. I don't know why we hate database design and diagramming and normalization so much. It really is like a practice kind of thing. Maybe that's why we hate it. We just don't practice it enough to feel comfortable. But there are going to be a lot of questions about that kind of thing. So let's look at some. So we have a student conducting a fundraising campaign with alumni to raise money for their organization. All records are kept manually in filing cabinets located in the Epsilon Pi Tau, is that how you say that, house and campus. Natasha has recently completed a class in database design and has volunteered to create a database to digitally store alumni information and generate an automated mailing. Natasha must have been a good student who did her normalization homework, because I've never heard of anyone volunteering to do such a thing. So her first step is to gather data requirements. I did some like weird bullets there. So we can see all the information that she wants to capture: names, addresses, email, year of graduation, degrees, donations. She wants to create the database in Microsoft Access, but she realizes that the information is not in normalized form. This is the use of Access here is troubling. So answer the questions to help normalize her database design. I don't know, it's like we threw Access and there's a red herring because we're not going to talk about it at all. So if you need to go back and refresh yourself on the different normal forms. Now the exam says that they will go up to 5 normal forms. The sample questions only go to 3, so I don't know how many of those you will actually see. But the goal of first normal form is A, minimize the inclusion of duplicate information. So that is first normal form. And then based on the requirements listed above, what subsets of data must be removed to make the database in second normal form? So second normal form removes subsets of data that apply to multiple rows of a table, pulls them out and puts them in separate tables because they create duplication. And so city and state are great candidates for this, because as you go through all of this data, you're going to have all kinds of duplication for city and state. You might have duplication for year of graduation, but A is the better answer here. And then what is not a benefit of enforcing second and third normal form? Not a benefit. So reduced storage requirements is a benefit. Implied query and update management is a benefit. So indexed data for easy retrieval indexing has nothing to do with normalization. We create indexes which help us with easy retrieval of information, but that has nothing to do with normalization. So C. Make sure that you're checking for those kinds of like not questions, like what's not a benefit. So reviewing normalization, reviewing at least 1, 2, 3 normal forms. I don't even think our book talks about, I'd have to go look, more than third normal form. That's just rude. Nobody does that. That's the thing. Like, why is this on the exam? But I don't know. I don't tell Microsoft what to do. They tell me what to do. Okay. Our next question is really about primary, foreign, and composite keys. I know these kinds of questions are throughout the exam. They're in almost all of the domains. So they need to create primary, foreign, and composite keys for each table. So to identify the best primary key for the demographic table, we'd have to go back, you can go back and look at the scenario. We have an alumni ID that's auto-generated by the system. That seems like the best answer because remember, primary keys have to be unique. Last name plus first name, still not going to be unique. So an alumni ID is a great choice. Which is an example of a foreign key. So remember, a foreign key would be a referenced key from another table. So in this case, I would say zip code would be a good, just given our choices, would be a good candidate for a foreign key. And then what is not a rule for the primary key? Well, we know it must be unique, but it doesn't have to be numeric. Must contain a value other than null. That's a true statement. So we know that it's B. It doesn't have to be numeric. It just has to be a value that is unique, that uniquely identifies a specific row and a relationship within a database. So a foreign key references a primary key in another table, which is why in the other question, I said, like zip code would be an okay example of a foreign key, but we don't know a lot about the database, so we have to kind of take what they give us. So again, going back over primary keys, foreign keys, data integrity, making sure that we understand how to keep data consistent and correct throughout the database. And then indexes. So like I said, indexes don't have anything to do with normalization, but we create indexes. And so we need to make sure we understand how to do that and what they're for. A quick review of the goals and advantages of indexes will help Natasha decide whether indexes will be valuable for the database and worth the time it will take to create them, because they take a lot of time to create. That's weird. So the primary key for the demographic table is a system-defined number. What should a good clustered index be based upon? All right, so a clustered index is arranged in a special order to make retrieval of information faster with direct access to the information. A non-clustered index is like the index of a book. So the index value points to actual information, like page 3, right? Index of a book. So what should a good clustered index be based upon? Last name, gender, or first name? Because the primary key for the demographic table is a system-defined number, then it would be last name, right? Arranged in a special order to make retrieval information faster. That would be our best candidate. Now, one of the things that students forget is that primary keys automatically get indexed. So you don't need to ever create indexes on your primary keys. That's an MS SQL fact, but that's true. So which is the characteristic of a non-clustered index? Well, I just talked about what non-clustered indexes are. So it contains the actual data, pages, or records, has keywords and pointers to the data, includes foreign keys. So it would be B, has keywords and pointers to the data, much like, we think of the index of a book. Which is not the result of using an index. So if we need to go back and review kind of like what is an index and why are they important? Not a result. Increased speed of data retrieval? No, that is a result. Indexes help us get data out faster. Increased storage requirements? Now that's true. Increased speed of writing records. Indexes have nothing to do with writing records. They're not going to make writing records faster. So C is the correct one here. Good evening, Diesel. What's up? This is for the 98-364 Database Fundamentals exam. Is what elastic? I don't understand your question. So in this particular section, indexes, what are they? Non-clustered versus clustered. Yep. Normalization. Why not Red Hat certs? I can't answer that question. Asking why not any kind of other certification is, I mean, it's just a debate. One really isn't better than the other, I guess, unless you want to ask an employer their opinion. All right, our final domain. Have I ever faced discrimination in IT? Every day. Especially on Twitch. No, honestly, that is a whole nother discussion about women in IT, and we have some great advocates out there. I definitely recommend, if you are a woman in IT, going and looking up like Women Who Code and some of those great organizations out there that have those kinds of support and mentorship, because they're awesome. When you turn on the dryer, maybe do your laundry when you're not watching Twitch. All right, our final domain that we're going to talk about, administering a database. So this is the smallest domain on the exam, 10 to 15%. Talks a lot about security, what objects should be secured, best practices, accounts, roles. This is probably the hardest section to tackle as a student, because you've more than likely not gotten any real administering kind of experience. It's all just been reading. So, do I run Windows Core? No, I don't have any reason to run Windows Core. All right, so security concepts, things like backup and restore. So let's look at some of these. Recently, it's like you could phrase this anytime. Recently, there's been a great deal of media coverage about companies losing the records of customers and clients through a variety of security breaches. The humongous insurance company does not want to see its name in the headlines, so officers decided to complete an internal audit to identify any possible security risks in their information systems. The team of analysts is very familiar with possible areas of risk, such as physical security, internal security, and external security. So according to the auditors, the company has a sound security plan to ensure data integrity by identifying users and the actions they can perform, and to protect data from hackers. But other aspects need to be considered in a comprehensive security plan. So like a lot of stuff there. So what should be included in the physical security plan? So a physical security plan identifies which users can do what actions. Or, I'm sorry, a physical security plan. The safety of the actual location of the database. So, like, who has access to the physical server, the location of it. So, stored user accounts and passwords, location of database administrators, none of that would have anything to do with physical security. We would be looking at the location of the servers with restricted access, right? So when we talk about physical security, like, can I just walk into a server room, or is the server room locked, or, you know, do I need a key fob or a fingerprint? Like, how secure is your facility? Like, that kind of thing. Yeah, pay more money to security professionals is probably the right answer. If you don't know a lot about security, you probably shouldn't be the one trying to secure your database, but so, which strategy is not related to an internal security plan? Right, so we would provide backups and operational continuity, like not related to an internal security plan. Well, that's definitely something we would do. Delete old and unused user accounts. Enforce user accounts to have strong passwords. Yeah. So, not related to internal security is A. Right. Unwanted physical touching. Don't touch the servers. It's unwanted. It's awesome. So which of the following is not an example of a security attack? applying roles to grant access, privilege escalation, or SQL injection. So applying roles to grant access is not a security attack. That's you being a bad admin or someone. Why isn't it C? Because we're talking about what's not related to an internal security plan. So an internal security plan would say delete old and unused user accounts and force user accounts to have strong passwords. Like that is related to your internal security plan. No, it's not. We're not talking about physical. We're just talking about the security plan. The previous question was about physical. This one has nothing to do with physical. Yeah, so not related, providing backups and operational continuity. According to Microsoft. According to Microsoft. So, not an example of a security attack. Applying roles to grant access. Privilege escalation, SQL injection, those are security attacks we would want to be prepared for. All right. Understanding backup and restore. So the team of analysts has completed the internal security audit for the humongous insurance company. They identified a few weaknesses in the system and recommend corrective measures to minimize the associated risks. Before they can complete their final report, they need to understand the backup and recovery plan. So before meeting with the database administrator, the group reviewed database backup and restore concepts to better understand these processes as they relate to the unique situations of the humongous insurance company. So our question, which of the following backup strategies only copies files that have changed since the last full backup? So there's different types of backups that you can perform. A full backup are all files copied for possible future retrieval. Incremental are only files changed since the last backup. A differential, only files that have changed since the last full backup are copied. So in this case, files that have changed since the last full backup would be a differential. So in which situation is the use of a replication service recommended? And then replicated services recreate a full or incremental reproduction of the database. So depending on your situation, I would say if your database must be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then a replication service would be recommended. That's, yeah. There's not a lot of discussion there. Explain how it's C. The company uses offsite storage for database backups. So if a company uses offsite storage for database backups, we're not really worried about uptime or use of that backup. We're talking about replication services. So replication services are going to be able to reproduce your whole database. So let's say that you have a downtime. You know, someone messes up the database, there's a physical problem, your site loses power, but your database needs to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Having offsite storage for database backups is a great plan for when your whole facility goes up in flames. But it is not a great solution for actually keeping the database up and available. Because having offsite storage means that someone then needs to go to that facility, bring the database back up with backups, which I'll tell you, a lot of places that have backup strategies don't ever actually do drills to figure out if they even understand how to restore those, and it's kind of a travesty. Thank you for the follow, Jacques Diesel, thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, when we're thinking about replication services are really about keeping the database up and available. And we start to think about cloud providers and such that do this, like Amazon. Just being able to keep the database alive. Diamond Miner, thank you. And available. So offsite storage is great. Absolutely recommended. If your building burns down or floods or something happens, then you definitely need to have access to your data in some other format. These days, cloud providers take care of a lot of those things for us too, which is great. No IT person left behind. All right, guys, we're almost there. So when performing a full backup, what information is optional? So data that is not changed. Server files such as user security, NAT information, data that's not changed since the last full backup. Well, if we're performing a full backup, we want all files copied for possible future retrieval. That's all of the data that lives inside of the server itself. We've been at this for 3 hours. I know, and I appreciate you guys are holding on to the end. Yeah, so B is the correct answer here. We would want data that's not changed. We want all the data. It doesn't matter if it's changed or not. Yeah. All right, so the last little bit in here is about like database administration fundamentals. They talk about core database concepts, relational databases, data manipulation, stuff like that. Some of these questions are very similar to the ones that we've seen in previous domains. This domain isn't listed on the website. It was in the information that I received about the update to the exam, but you'll see that there's only 5 of them here, but there is actually a 6th section of the exam in the latest edition. So again, these questions are very similar to kind of the ones that we saw in similar domains, like, what are not methods to manipulate data, or what is normalization? Just like basic questions, I threw a couple of those in there. They felt very repetitive, and I personally thought it was very odd that they created another section to just repeat information that they had in other domains. So it's kind of interesting, I guess. But that's it. That's it. I know we've been crushing it for so many hours. So if you are, let me grab this, want this doc, exclamation point doc will give you access to this right here, with my sample question slides and the little overview, the details is pages that we've been looking at. I do have some other notes and things that I use just to put this together, so I will link those in here as well. I do this, and I appreciate that you say that, because I know a lot of students, they've never sat a certification exam before. These are geared towards people that are students, again, not having that hands-on experience from years of work. That's what the professional level exams are for. But it is kind of that high stakes environment. I do, want you to take it seriously, because at the end of the day, if you pass, then you get that nice certification exam that you can, you get the Microsoft Partner Center. You can put that on your resume. You can put your badge in LinkedIn. And it gives you that extra little push to make yourself stand out. And that's really what the job market is all about, is demonstration of skill and standing out.